Hello my friends, you're listening to Ebird Online and I'm back with another review. I hope you're all well, and to everyone in the UK, I hope you're all enjoying the partial lifting of lockdown. I know I certainly am. So this is part 2 of my tell-all special, and today we're going to be talking about Jovi and Yara and Brandon and Julia. And so quite a few interesting things happened in this segment, and one of the things I really want to draw on is one, the character of Julia. Was Julia what we thought she was? I'm not so sure. And the second thing that I think is quite interesting that we saw was the relationship between Julia and Yara. When they first met in the green room, Julia said, "I really like Yara. We joke with each other all the time on social media." But I have a feeling that this relationship is going to be, how can we say, fractured by the end of this first part of the tell-all. Very quickly before we begin, thank you to everyone that's subscribed to me so far. I'm really genuinely grateful, and thank you to all of those who have written comments as well. Like I said in the last part of the tell-all, this week or next week at some point I'm going to do a best of comment, the funniest comments, etc. So if you have any interesting or funny comments you want to put in, please do so in the next few days, as I'll be going through and making lists. If you haven't done so yet, please press that big red subscribe button and don't forget to press like if you enjoy the video. And so without further ado, I give you the tell-all part 2. And so we start out today with Yara and Jovi. So first up, Yara talks a little bit about what it's like to be a new mother. And she sheds a tear when she says, "I love Jovi even more now, because when I see Jovi with his daughter and I see how he cares for her and how much he loves her, it really melts my heart." Oh Yara, don't you know it's a tell-all? You're about 10 seconds away from having your lovely little dream shattered. Because the first thing I decide to show Yara is the clip of Jovi and the stripper. So for those of you who don't recall, Jovi on his bachelor night went out with one of his friends to a strip bar, and his friend bought him a private dance, and all we see is Jovi going upstairs with the stripper to some private rooms. And guys, it really irritated me because when they showed this clip, Yara's face fell and she looked really unhappy. She moved away from Jovi, she took her hand away from his, and all of the girls were looking unhappy, but all of the guys were laughing and thinking the whole thing was really funny. And then Jovi said what I absolutely knew he was going to say at this point: "Oh, my friend forced me to go there." And if you guys remember, when Jovi's friend said, "I'm going to buy you a private dance," Jovi stood up as quick as a flash and then he said, "Oh, are you forcing me?" And I knew at that point he'd said it only for the cameras and he was going to pretend, "I've been forced to go upstairs against my will." And he did that exactly for this moment, so he could say, "You can see I was forced." Jovi, people have been trying to convince you to act like an adult and like a normal human being for the last 28 years. No one's managed to force you to do that now, have they? And so Sean asked mischievously, "What happens in a private dance?" And Jovi said, "Oh, come on, everybody knows what happens in a private dance." And then Sean said, "Tarik, can you tell me?" And Tarik said, "Why did it come to me?" And I'm in agreement with Tarik. Why did it come to him? You know good and well, Tarik has never paid for a private dance. Tarik's only paid for the full works with 5 or 6 girls at a time in Thailand. Tarik, we're on to you. We're not stupid. And then Tarik grinned a bit and said, "Well, you go with the woman upstairs and then you talk about politics and physics." Tarik, your brother Dean was right. You haven't got a comedic bone in your body. I would say stick to rapping, but just stick to being, well, disingenuous. So Jovi, who was busy smiling throughout this whole segment, whilst realising the mother of his child and his brand new wife was crying and unhappy. And if it was possible, I now think even less of Jovi. And Jovi said, "Well, the girl takes her top off and she dances on you." Dances on you? Ew, that's just disgusting. And he said, "And then you go back downstairs. This happens every night." And then Zied said, "You go to strip bars every night." Well, apparently he used to. And he said, no, strippers do this every night. Jovi, Yara doesn't give an F what strippers do every night. She wants to know what her husband and the father of her child does every night. But Yara let me down a little bit and she said, "It's disrespectful to me, but what can I do? I can't do nothing now." That's the big problem, Yara. Because you kind of make a few moody comments and then you don't do anything, this is why Jovi's behaviour will never change. If you played up absolute merry hell and demanded that he would no longer go to strip bars and had a proper conversation with him as to why you had to find out all of this information from Sora the Snake and why he hadn't told you previously about his long and illustrious career with strippers, he would have to take it more seriously, but you don't. You kind of moan and then let him carry on in the same manner that he has always done. And then Rebecca stepped in to help Sean do her job And she said, Jovi, how would you feel if it was the other way round? If she went and had a private dance with a male stripper? And Jovi said, I wouldn't really be very happy. But it's different with guys, that's what guys do. And then Sean introduced Mother Gwen. And Sean asked, Gwen, what did you think when you saw Jovi disappear off with that stripper? And Gwen said, I wanted to shake him. He's been on a bachelor party for the last 10 to 12 years. There was no need to go and do it on the night before he got married. And Gwen said, I don't want my son to be that guy. Newsflash, Gwen, he's already that guy. And do you want to know why? Because your husband, his dad, is that guy too. He was born that guy, and he'll more than likely die that guy. And I'm a big believer in that usually a leopard doesn't change its spots. And then we cut to scenes of Jovi doing a lie detector test, and he'd lied about sleeping with strippers. And he also admitted he knew it would be a bad thing if Yara found out. Jovi, you didn't care because you knew by having it televised, Yara would find out. So that's completely ridiculous. You literally couldn't care less and you knew you'd get away with it. But then Yara told Sean, I don't really judge Jovi for the past because, you know, that's the past, what can I do about it now? But it's awful for me because I need to eat shit again. And Tarik said to Jovi, this is the point at which you say, I won't ever do this again. And then Jovi said, I won't ever do this again. He sounded about as convincing as Andrew saying, I don't know why Amira didn't get on the plane. And Gwen said, I always have these talks with him, and I'm a little disappointed. And you could tell that Gwen was actually more than a little disappointed, because it seems as if her and Yara now have got a really beautiful relationship. But you can tell ultimately that Gwen is very loyal, and she didn't want to dog Jovi out in front of everybody. Mike's mum, take note. But what happened next? Well, super irritant Julia piped up, and she said, it's totally natural. You know, there's nothing wrong with strippers. People used to think I was a stripper. I'm not. But, you know, it's completely natural. I don't see anything wrong with it. And Jovi said, thanks, Julia. But then Julia, in the first of her little snake moments, turned around and said, but if you do it, Brandon, I'll absolutely kill you. What? So let's get this straight. Julia, do you agree with stripping or not? It seems like you're saying there's nothing really wrong with stripping, but you must find something wrong about it because you don't want your own husband to do it. If that's all you've got to say, pipe the F down. You're not helping things at all. But it was quite weird because I low-key felt that she was kind of trying to dig Yara out a little bit, more or less as if to say, your husband's a bad husband, he goes to strip clubs, and my husband does no such a thing. But hey ho Yara, one up for me. And guys, let me know what you think in comments. Did you think that Julia was kind of trying to one-up Yara throughout this tell-all? The longer it went on, the more I did. And they went for a break, and even then, back in the green room, Julia was asking Brandon, do you think that Jovi had sex with the stripper? And he said, I don't know. And she said, if you ever do that, I'll kill you. And Yara came up behind her and said, what are you talking about? And Julia again said, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just don't want Brandon to do it. And Yara said, you know what, I'm over this conversation now. Julia, pick a side. Either you don't care and it's totally natural, or you have a problem. It cannot be both. And next up we talk about Brandon and Julia. And so Sean asked, how are things with Brandon's family? And Julia said, I really love Brandon's mum, but guys never ever live with somebody's parents. It's a nightmare. And the rest of the cast all say, oh my god, you're crazy to live with in-laws. It's a recipe for disaster. And then they talked a bit about how Brandon doesn't stand up to his parents properly. And everybody was in agreement. And then Julia helpfully explains, I yell all the time at Brandon. I'm so pissed off with him because of the stress of living with my in-law. And Yara began to get her own back on Julia, and she said, oh my god, I would never live with in-laws. I want to have sex so nobody can hear. I want to walk around naked in the apartment. Yeah, Yara, we get it. And when Yara was saying this, Julia looked slightly uncomfortable. And then giant child Jovi decides to give Brandon some advice. You know, Brandon, you should have got yourself sorted out before Julia came. You should have got an apartment. I would never have brought Yara over unless I was ready. And I suppose Jovi did rent an apartment in a nice part of town. However, Jovi, I don't really consider your apartment was ready. There was a broken table in the middle of the floor, as I remember. But then Brandon said, I think possibly the first interesting thing he's ever said. And he said, maybe I did try and get an apartment. What? For the first and probably last time ever, Brandon, tell me more. And then Brandon lets us know he was looking to buy an apartment. And when he showed Julia online, she said, never, I don't like any of those apartments. And Julia had to climb down from the lofty moral high ground and admit, yeah, it was my mistake. I didn't like any of the apartments. Oh my God. So all of the shit you went through was all your own fault, and you never sought to stop people chatting rubbish online about your in-laws. You never stopped people from saying Brandon's weak and Brandon's a mummy's boy. All along, it was you. Are you kidding me? This girl's a piece of work. She really is. And at this point, a funny thing did happen. Mike piped up and said, well, you got to know what it's like to, pay bills and work out if you have enough money to pay your bills and different things. I literally can't believe I'm hearing this from Mike. You live in a trailer. Be quiet. Be all the way quiet. And at this point, I'd like to invite everybody to walk away from logic and reason, as they have no place on planet Julia. Julia, you have pulled the wool over everybody's eyes, and you don't even really care. Julia's talked herself into a cul-de-sac. That's right, Julia, there's nowhere to go. It's a dead end. And all of this time, Brandon's been getting absolutely cussed on social media, being called a mummy's boy. And I know that Brandon's the walking, talking epitome of the word meh, but he must have been secretly fuming every time that Julia moaned and complained about rules and so on, because he knew all along we didn't even need to be here. Julia, my love, unless Brandon was proposing to move into Mike's trailer, you should have got the F out. And then you could have spent your 90 days renovating and decorating it. Julia, what's wrong with you? And then Sean introduces the oldest swingers in town, Ron and Betty. And incidentally, I still haven't heard any denials of that storyline. Trey, interesting. And Sean reminds Betty that she used to think Julia was a stripper. Really, Sean? I seem to remember her thinking that she was an escort, not a stripper. I think you'll find there's quite a marked difference. And Julia explains that Brandon thought she was a stripper too, and that all her friends used to say she was stripping, even though she wasn't. She was go-go dancing. And from the pictures I saw, she was go-go dancing in a bra and a thong. So I guess it's kind of similar. I don't know. But Julia felt it necessary to tell us all, I'm trained. Julia, I doubt strippers just climb up the pole one day and start making money. I think you'll find they probably trained too. But hey ho. And then Sean asked questions about Betty and Ron's quite extensive rulebook. Firstly about not being allowed to sleep in the same room. And everybody else there seems to think that was a really harsh rule. I don't really think so. I can tell you now, my parents would not let me sleep with a boyfriend under their roof. No way, no how. And Betty explains that's always been a rule, and Brandon has never been allowed to invite a girlfriend over to sleep in his room. And then they go on to the all-important full-time job of the farm work that Julia was expected to do. And Julia pipes up. And she said, when I have to do this, I want to leave. I hate doing this farm work. And Yara tried to help her out, and she said, I think that you felt you needed to prove yourself that you're a good girl, but you don't need to prove anything. Just be yourself. Bad advice, Julia. Don't be yourself. Be somebody else. I don't care who. Anybody else. Because you're getting on everybody's nerves right now. And Julia said, I hated doing it, but I did it for Brandon because these were Brandon's jobs and I wanted to spend time with him in the evening, so if I didn't do them, he had to do them when he got home from work and I wouldn't see him. What? Rewind for a second. So Betty and Ron didn't require you to do the work. You chose to do it to help your boyfriend, your fiance and your future husband. Oh my lord, Julia, you have led everybody down the garden path. And Yara said, you had us all saying, poor girl, and you made everyone feel sorry for you. But you kind of tricked us. And Rebecca said, yeah, I agree. Everybody felt so sorry for you. But you chose to do this. And all the time, Julia was just smiling like a goon. Julia, you're not looking great. You're really not. Guys, I think that Julia thinks that she can get away with this. But my memory is long. And I can tell you, even if one day I manage to forget, I'll never forgive. You outright misrepresented all of the facts. And it's fair to say, Julia has an astonishing level of arrogance. And then Julia goes on to talk about how she clashed with Betty. And she said, when you've got two strong personalities in one house, everybody wants to be the boss. But you know, I'm the boss, but unfortunately, it's not my house. Julia, my love, you ain't the boss. You may have wriggled out of feeding the animals. And you may have manipulated your way into Brandon's room. You're lots and lots of things, but boss isn't one of them. And Yara echoed my sentiments exactly when she said, I am sorry to tell you, you're not the boss because you're still feeding animals and you're doing this for free. And you could tell by the look on Julia's face, she didn't like when she was being told by Yara, you're a little mug and you ain't no boss. but Yara was correct. And then Sean asked if Betty was meddling in the relationship, and they were talking about the whole birth control thing, which to me is a moot point because she never took the birth control. But what really irritated me about this segment was everybody was in one of two camps. The first camp was that it was none of Betty and Ron's business, because Julia's body is her body. And the second camp, which Jovi and Yara were clearly in, was the fact that they lived in their house, and if they did have a baby, they would in some ways be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of said baby. So they did have a dog in this fight, and Sean adjudicated between the two arguments. But this is what bugs me sometimes about Sean. She's apparently this award-winning journalist with some superior level of thought. What about the third point? The point that there's not just one way to have birth control. Betty, why didn't you come down on your own flesh and blood, your own son, Brandon? Why didn't you ask Brandon why he didn't want to use birth control? Not one person seemed to consider that, and there was no responsibility for this whole conversation put onto Brandon at any point. Sean, they're equally responsible for contraception, so why didn't you point this out? And everybody kept saying, Julia, you're not ready for kids. And Julia said, I am ready for kids, but well, I can't decide, and she was flip-flopping a bit. And then she said to Yara, but you weren't ready. And Yara said, no, we've thought about having kids way before this. And I believed them because obviously Yara had got pregnant before. And so they very well knew using no contraception might lead it to happen again. But Julia, what difference would it make if Yara was ready or Yara wasn't ready? Don't compare yourself to other people. Just compare yourself to yourself. Think about your own situation. And that was pretty much it from the people over at the farm. And I'd just like to say this much. Ron, Betty, Brandon, you've been done a massive disservice. Brandon was made out to be a totally weak mama's boy, and whilst this little bit of information doesn't absolve him of everything that he's done, I can completely understand why he wasn't standing up for Julia to his parents, knowing we're only here because I acquiesced to Julia's requests and wants for a beautiful apartment. And also to Betty and Ron, because they got all the blame for making Julia an indentured servant. But in fact we find out all of these jobs were Brandon's, and in actual fact Julia had chosen to do them, but she'd also chosen to moan like an MF whilst doing them. Very, very poor form, Julia, very poor form. So guys, let me know what you think. Do you think that Julia was out of order in letting everybody else take the fall for what was ostensibly her own decision not to move out straight away? Also, do we think more of Brandon? Is he less of a mama's boy, considering the fact that he was quite happy to move out? And that was the main thing levelled against him. And do we think that Jovi will actually stay out of the strip clubs for the rest of his life? I sincerely doubt it, but guys, let me know what you think in comments down below. Please like, subscribe and all of that good stuff. This video was so long, I'm going to do Rebecca and Zied and the other half of Julia and Yara's argument in the final segment, and that will be up tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Ebird Online, and I bid you good day.